First Contact and Invasion. Grand Admiral Zarak stood on the command deck of the inevitable conquest, his 4 eyes surveying the vast armada that stretched before him. 3,000 warships, the pride of the Northern Collective, arranged in perfect attack formation. Through the massive viewport, the blue-green planet that would soon become their newest acquisition hung suspended against the void of space. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he remarked to his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Velox, who approached with calculated steps. "Indeed, Admiral," Velox replied, her exoskeletal plates shifting slightly in the ship's artificial gravity. "The Supreme Council awaits your final assessment before authorizing the invasion." Zarek's upper eyes narrowed while his lower pair remained fixed on Earth. "Of course they do. Heaven forbid they make a decision without 17 layers of bureaucratic approval." Turning his massive frame, nearly 9 feet of armored chitin and military decoration, he towered over Velox. "Patch them through to my private chamber, and tell Fleet Captain Morax to stop adjusting the dreadnoughts. If he moves them one more time for aesthetic purposes, I'll have him cleaning waste processors with his proboscis." Minutes later, Zarak stood before the holographic projections of the 5-member Supreme Council, their elaborate ceremonial armor glinting despite being mere light constructs. "Counselors," he offered with the minimal bow protocol demanded, "to what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" Counselor Thex, her head crests quivering with anxiety, spoke first. "Admiral Zarak, we've received concerning intelligence about these humans." Zarak barely suppressed a laugh. "Concerning? These creatures haven't even unified their own planet. They're fighting over arbitrary geographical boundaries and invisible deities. Their most advanced weapons would barely scratch our scout ships." "Nevertheless," rumbled Counselor Morv, his massive bulk shifting uncomfortably, "our xenopsychologists have flagged several warning indicators in their behavioral patterns." "Such as?" Zarak didn't bother hiding his disdain. "Unpredictability, remarkable adaptability, and a rather disturbing tendency toward what they call scorched earth tactics. They appear willing to destroy their own resources rather than allow enemies to claim them." Zarak waved a dismissive hand through the hologram. "All species fight harder when cornered. That's basic xenobiology. Once we demonstrate our overwhelming force, they'll capitulate like every other rational species. And if they're not rational?" Counselor Xela asked softly, her translucent skin revealing the complex network of neural clusters beneath. "Then they'll die," Zarak said simply. "Either way, their world becomes ours, their resources become ours, their system becomes another footnote in the glorious expansion of the collective." The counselors exchanged uneasy glances, a reaction Zarak had seen too many times. Politicians forever fretting over the moral implications of necessary actions. "The invasion fleet is ready," he continued before they could voice more doubts. "My strategic assessment remains unchanged. Total conquest within 3 standard cycles. Minimal casualties on our side. Acceptable destruction of infrastructure." "Very well, Admiral," Thex said after a lengthy pause. "The Council grants authorization to proceed. May the Void Mothers guide your path." "They always do," Zarak replied, terminating the connection without the customary farewell gestures. 2 cycles later, Intelligence Officer Nex addressed the command staff in the primary briefing chamber. "This is how first contact actually happened," she announced, gesturing toward the holographic replay hovering above the table. "Not with diplomatic overtures or cultural exchange, but with their primitive orbital defense systems firing on our scout vessels." The assembled officers watched as grainy footage showed human missiles streaming toward Northern reconnaissance craft. The scouts had easily evaded the projectiles, but the intent was clear. "Typical primitive paranoia," muttered Captain Morax, his facial tendrils curling in disgust. "See threat, attack threat. No communication attempts, no diplomatic protocols." Zarak leaned forward, massive forearms resting on the table. "And our response?" Nex's expression shifted to something approaching discomfort. "Well, sir, Scout Commander Kraz may have overreacted." The footage continued, showing one of the scouts pivoting sharply and firing a single energy pulse at the missile launch facility. The human structure vanished in a blinding flash, leaving nothing but a glowing crater. Overreacted. Zarek's voice remained dangerously calm. By vaporizing their installation. In his defense, sir, Nex said hurriedly, the humans had been broadcasting some rather aggressive military transmissions. Our linguists had only partially decoded their primary languages, but the tone was unmistakable. Velox cleared her throat. Perhaps we should review the actual transmission. The hologram shifted to display an audio waveform. A human voice filled the room. This is General Jana Kowalski of the United Earth Defense Command. Unidentified vessels, you have entered restricted aerospace. Identify yourselves immediately or face defensive action. That's it, Zarek asked incredulously. That's what prompted Kraz to vaporize their facility. A standard military challenge. There were additional transmissions, sir, Nex explained, increasingly hostile in tone. And Scout Commander Kraz reports their primitive electromagnetic weapons were beginning to lock onto his vessel. Zarek rubbed his cranial ridges in frustration. So instead of attempting communication, or simply leaving their detection range, Kraz decided to announce our presence to the entire species by demonstrating our weapons capabilities. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. The council wanted a smooth transition. Zarek continued, pacing the length of the table. A demonstration of overwhelming force followed by capitulation with minimal infrastructure damage. Now, thanks to Kraz's incompetence, the humans know we're coming. They'll have time to prepare, however futile their preparations might be. Actually, sir, Nex interjected cautiously, there's been a peculiar development in their response. She manipulated the controls again, bringing up a series of intercepted transmissions from Earth. Their global communication networks erupted with activity after the incident, as expected. Military alerts, government emergency protocols, civilian panic, all standard responses. But then, nothing. Nex looked genuinely perplexed. Within 48 hours, all chatter about the incident virtually disappeared from their public networks. Their militaries remain at high alert, but their civilian populations appear to have returned to normal activities. They're keeping it quiet to prevent panic, suggested Morax. No, Velox said slowly. Something else is happening. Their behavior patterns don't match any standard threat response model. Whatever they're planning, it won't matter, Zorak declared, moving toward the exit. The invasion proceeds as scheduled. 3 days into the invasion, Grand Admiral Zarek could barely contain his satisfaction as the tactical display showed another cluster of human resistance points blinking out of existence. Absolutely pathetic, he exclaimed. I've seen better organized defenses from pre-spaceflight agrarian societies. The hegemony forces had secured nearly 40% of Earth's surface with minimal casualties. Major population centers had fallen within hours, their primitive defense systems obliterated by precision orbital strikes. Human military bases had been the first targets, reduced to smoldering craters before their occupants could launch a meaningful response. Sector 17 reports complete pacification, Admiral, announced Lieutenant Grax from his monitoring station. Minimal civilian casualties as per your directives. Excellent, Zarak nodded magnanimously, ignoring the fact that he couldn't care less about civilian casualty rates. The Supreme Council had insisted on population preservation for labor purposes. Velox approached with a data tablet. Resource extraction teams already deployed in secured zones, sir. Preliminary surveys indicate the humans were remarkably inefficient in their own extraction methods. We're identifying untapped deposits of rare minerals throughout their continental shelves. Of course they were inefficient, Zarek snorted. Look at their energy infrastructure, still burning fossil fuels in half their territories. It's like they actively chose the most polluting, least effective methods available. The command deck erupted in sycophantic laughter, officers eager to join in the Admiral's mockery of their conquered foe. Only Velox remained stoic, her eyes fixed on a secondary display showing real-time updates from ground forces. "Something troubling you, Commander?" Zarak asked, noticing her abstention from the merriment. "A pattern anomaly, sir," she replied cautiously. "I've been tracking resistance movements, and there's something unusual about their tactics." Before she could elaborate, Communications Officer Trex called out urgently, "Admiral, we're detecting a high-powered transmission originating from somewhere in the Northern Hemisphere. It's being broadcast on all frequencies, including our secure channels." "Impossible," Zarak snapped. "We destroyed all their major communication centers in the first wave." Sir, it appears to be directed specifically at our command ships. The message is being transmitted in perfect Northern." Stunned silence fell over the command deck. "Let's hear it," Zarak ordered, a strange uneasiness settling in his thoracic cavity. A calm, almost serene human voice filled the command deck. "To the invading forces of the Northern Collective. This is Earth's final transmission. You'll regret this war. We gave you the chance to turn back. Remember that." The message repeated once, then fell silent. Zarak stared at the tactical display, at the blinking indicators of his victorious forces spread across the planet's surface. Something cold slithered down his spine, a sensation he hadn't felt in decades of military command. Not fear, he told himself. Merely caution. "Trace that transmission," he ordered. "Find its source and obliterate it. And put all forces on heightened alert. Whatever final gesture these primitives are planning, I want it crushed immediately." But deep in his primary heart, Grand Admiral Zarak couldn't shake the feeling that something had just changed, that somehow, despite all evidence to the contrary, they had missed something fundamental about these humans. He would soon learn exactly what that was. The reckoning. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the 7th Assault Division." The words hung in the air of the command center, an impossibility that nobody wanted to acknowledge. Zarak turned slowly from the tactical display, his exoskeletal plates clicking softly with the movement. "Repeat that, Lieutenant." "The entire 7th Division, sir. 23 capital ships, 47 support vessels. Complete communication blackout approximately 7 minutes ago." Velok stepped forward, her lower eyes scanning the data feeds. Last known position was over what the humans call the Pacific Ocean. No distress signals, no automated emergency beacons. Zarak's mandibles clicked in irritation. Sensor malfunction, or communication jamming. These humans don't possess weapons capable of disabling, let alone destroying 23 capital ships simultaneously. "That was my initial assessment as well, Admiral," Velox replied, her tone carefully neutral. "However, we're now also receiving reports of ground force failures across multiple sectors. Mechanized units shutting down, infantry armor systems malfunctioning, weapon systems going offline." "Impossible." Zarak slammed his armored fist against the command console, cracking its reinforced surface. Their electromagnetic pulse weapons were primitive, short-ranged. "We neutralized those capabilities in the first strikes." "Sir," Communications Officer Trex interrupted, "we're detecting unusual activity in Earth's orbital space." The main view screen shifted to show Earth's upper atmosphere, where dozens of small objects were emerging from concealed positions. "Satellites?" Zarak asked, leaning forward. "No, sir. These appear to be weapons platforms. Powered down until now, with minimal heat signatures that our scans interpreted as debris. They're activating in sequence." As the command staff watched in stunned silence, the first of the orbital platforms oriented itself toward one of the Northern destroyer groups and fired. A coherent beam of energy, invisible except where it ionized the atmosphere, connected platform to destroyer for a fraction of a second. The destroyer didn't explode. It simply disintegrated, breaking apart into constituent molecules that scattered in the vacuum of space. "What in the void was that?" Zarak whispered, genuine fear creeping into his voice for the first time in his long military career. "Unknown weapon technology, sir," Science Officer Moda replied, her voice trembling. Preliminary analysis suggests some form of molecular bond disruptor. It's not supposed to be possible at that scale. Evasive maneuvers. Zarek roared. All ships, break formation and prepare tow. He was interrupted by a chime from the communication system. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. It's on all frequencies again. Zarek hesitated, then nodded. Put it through. The same calm human voice from the previous transmission filled the command center. This is Dr. Eleanor Chen, speaking on behalf of United Earth. Your invasion has triggered our Prometheus protocol. We hoped we would never need to use it. The tactical display began showing more Norvan ships vanishing, first one by one, then in groups of 3 or 4 as more orbital platforms came online. Contrary to what you believed, Admiral Zarek, we are not primitives. We simply chose a different path. While you built your empire on conquest, we built ours on contingency planning. For centuries, we suspected we weren't alone. We prepared accordingly. The woman's voice contained no malice, only a profound weariness that somehow made her words even more chilling. The technology you're witnessing was developed and hidden 2 decades ago, after we detected your scout ships at the edge of our solar system. We knew you were watching. We maintained the illusion of technological inferiority because we understood that your kind interprets advancement only in terms of weapons and conquest. Zarek stared at the view screen, watching his mighty armada being systematically erased from existence. Everything he had known, everything he had believed about these humans, had been catastrophically wrong. The fossil fuels you mocked. A deliberate continuation to mask our actual energy capabilities. The political divisions you exploited. Largely theater, maintained to keep your intelligence analysts focused on our apparent weaknesses rather than our true strengths. More alarms sounded as reports flooded in of ground forces encountering unexplainable resistance. Human soldiers in armor that repelled Norvan weapons, vehicles that seemed to appear from nowhere, underground facilities emerging from beneath supposedly primitive human cities. We gave you every opportunity to leave us in peace. Your scout commander Kraz could have departed without incident. Your invasion fleet could have turned back when you received our warning. Now we have no choice but to demonstrate why that was the only rational choice. The woman paused, and when she spoke again, there was something like pity in her voice. As promised, you will regret this war, Admiral, not just for the lives lost, but for the fundamental miscalculation at its core. We are not like the other species you've conquered. We never prepare for the war we expect. We prepare for the war we fear. In that moment, as the inevitable conquest shuddered under the impact of a weapon that shouldn't exist, Zarek understood the true meaning of Earth's final message. It hadn't been a threat or a boast. It had been a genuine mourning, perhaps even an expression of regret for what they would be forced to do. We are activating Phase 2 of the Prometheus Protocol, Dr. Chen continued. All Norvan forces have 30 minutes to begin retreat procedures. Any vessels remaining in Earth orbit after that time will be neutralized. Ground forces that surrender will be treated according to interstellar humanitarian protocols that we've developed in anticipation of this day. Zarek looked around at his command staff, at the faces showing various stages of shock and disbelief. Their perfect invasion, their guaranteed victory, had transformed into catastrophe in less than an hour. One final note, Admiral, Chen's voice continued. We've transmitted the specifications of our defensive capabilities to your Supreme Council, along with evidence of your dismissal of our warning. They have responded with an immediate recall order for all Norvan forces. I suggest you comply. The transmission ended, leaving only the sound of alarms and the increasingly frantic reports of ships lost, ground forces surrounded, supply lines cut. Orders, sir, Velox asked quietly. Zarek stared at the tactical display, at the rapidly dwindling indicators of his once mighty invasion force. Everything he had built his career on, his understanding of warfare, his assessment of less advanced species, his absolute confidence in Norvan military superiority, lay in ruins around him. "Send the retreat signal," he finally said, his voice hollow. "All forces to disengage and withdraw immediately." As the inevitable conquest broke orbit and accelerated away from the blue-green planet that had seemed so ripe for conquest just days earlier, Zarek remained on the command deck, watching Earth recede on the view screen. 6 months later, he stood before the Supreme Council again, not as the hero of another conquest, but as the sole surviving flag officer of the worst military disaster in Norvan history. "The humans have accepted our peace envoys," Counselor Thex informed him, her head crests now perfectly still in a formal setting. "They have agreed not to pursue reparations, provided we honor the exclusion zone around their solar system." "Most generous of them," Zarek replied, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "They have also provided us with something they call cultural exchanges: art, literature, music, philosophy. No technology, notably. Their message indicates they hope for eventual diplomatic relations, once our species has reflected on the nature of sustainable interstellar coexistence." Counselor Morv leaned forward. "You've studied them more than anyone, Zarek. In your assessment, could we defeat them in a future conflict, now that we understand their true capabilities?" Zarek considered the question carefully, remembering Dr. Chen's words. "We never prepare for the war we expect. We prepare for the war we fear." "No," he said finally, "because what we've witnessed wasn't their response to the war they expected. It was merely their first contingency. Their message wasn't a boast. It was a warning born of genuine regret for what they knew they could do to us." He looked up at the council, seeing in their eyes the same realization that had come to him in those final moments in Earth orbit. "We regret this war not just because we lost, but because in provoking it, we've awakened something that will forever change the balance of power in the galaxy, not through conquest or territorial expansion, but through the simple revelation that they exist, and that they've been watching, planning, and preparing, not just for us, but for whatever else might be out there in the darkness between stars." As he left the council chamber for the last time, stripped of rank and command, Zarek found himself strangely at peace. The humans had been right. He regretted this war. But perhaps in that regret, both species had found something more valuable than conquest, a reason to look outward together, rather than against each other. For if humans had prepared so thoroughly for the Norvans, what else might they be preparing for? And might the Norvans want to be on humanity's side when that preparation proved necessary?